Former Secretary of State John Kerry is accused of leaking information about a U.S. ally to Iran. Kerry is now facing increasing pressure to step down. As to the border, 4 counties in Texas make disaster declarations due to the immigration crisis. They say their residents are at imminent risk and they don't have the resources to contain the threat. The National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. reopens in May. For the first time, visitors will see a portrait of former President Trump in the museum's signature exhibition. And President Biden's first big speech to Congress is coming up tonight, on the eve of his first 100 days in office. What are some topics likely to be covered? Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Former President Trump is joining the rest of the presidents in the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. His portrait is going up, but first, some updates. On international issues, former Secretary of State John Kerry facing accusations of leaking information to Iran. The New York Times reported on April 25th that John Kerry told Iran's foreign minister Israel had attacked Iran's interest in Syria at least 200 times. This came from an alleged leaked tape of a conversation that supposedly took place when Kerry was President Obama's Secretary of State. Kerry denied the accusations. He tweeted on Monday, "This never happened, either when I was Secretary of State or since." Kerry is facing calls from Republicans to step down from his post as a U.S. Special Envoy for Climate Change. Former U.S. Ambassador to the United States, Nikki Haley, posted on Twitter, "This is disgusting on many levels." Biden and Kerry have to answer for why Kerry would be tipping off Iran, the #1 sponsor of terror, while stabbing one of our greatest partners, Israel, in the back. New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, meanwhile, tweeted, "This is a criminal act, and John Kerry must be immediately investigated and prosecuted. President Biden must immediately remove John Kerry from any government or advisory position." According to the Washington Examiner, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo led the calls for Kerry to be investigated. Pompeo slammed Kerry for his inappropriate meetings with Iran, saying, "I'm actually doing this publicly and openly, unlike Secretary Kerry, who had private conversations with the Iranians that was trying to undermine our administration." Those comments came at a press conference on the Capitol Hill a week ago. Pompeo said the tape proves what he has said for years, that Kerry informed the Iranians of Israeli operations. This comes as the U.S. Navy on Tuesday fired warning shots toward 3 Iranian patrol boats in the North Persian Gulf. That's after a close encounter with American vessels. The U.S. Navy said pre-planned responses were used to de-escalate the situation, avoid collision, and reduce risk of miscalculation. While such incidents have come up from time to time over the past 5 years, it's been relatively quiet the last year. Now let's turn closer to home, the crisis at the southern border. 4 counties in Texas making disaster declarations due to the immigration crisis there. One such county, Goliad, said in their disaster declaration, "The ongoing border crisis has resulted in thousands of illegal aliens invading South Texas and overwhelming our local, state, and federal law enforcement." Goliad County Sheriff Roy Boyd says things had been coming under control during the last administration. He says that came to a real fast end, and it's the Wild West on steroids. Another county is Kinney County. The county sheriff there, Brad Coe, tells the Epoch Times he has only 6 full-time deputies and too much territory to cover. He says, "My guys have been in more pursuits in the past year than most police officers will do in a lifetime. We're catching more and more every day. We file charges, then we have to let them go because our jails are full." Along with the increase in immigrants, there's also a rise in other problems. According to Customs and Border Patrol statistics, seizures of drugs and guns is skyrocketing, especially fentanyl. And another MS-13 gang member was caught crossing the border with immigrants in Arizona. The Biden administration responding to the new developments by rolling back more Trump-era policies. It now prohibits Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, agents from making arrests in or near courthouses. And President Biden just nominated Trump critic Ed Gonzalez to lead ICE. He criticized Trump for authorizing large immigration raids and stopped his county's program to closely cooperate with ICE. Now, senators are holding discussions about moving forward with other parts of Biden's immigration platform. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says the crisis should be addressed first. Goliad County Judge Mike Bennett signed his county's declaration. He expects 200 or more Texas counties will join them. Kinney County Attorney Brent Smith says the state should declare an emergency. Then Texas could enforce its own border with Mexico to protect its citizens. Sheriff Boyd says he's given up hope that the federal government will help. So he says Texas has to fix the problem themselves, and if they don't, he says it will all be over, and the United States will be no more. And Texas Representative Pat Fallon calling on Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas to abolish the Biden administration's catch and release immigration policy. He said on Tuesday it threatens local communities. The Department of Homeland Security ordered the Franklin County Sheriff's Department to release illegal immigrants onto the streets of his district under the immigration policy. Fallon sent Mayorkas a letter in response, saying, "I cannot sit idly by while people in the Department of Homeland Security jeopardize the safety of my constituents. I urge Secretary Mayorkas to immediately revise the policies of catch and release that are threatening our communities." He goes on to say he is ready to work with anyone who is willing to close the floodgates and put the lives and safety of American citizens first. He went on to reference an incident last week that saw the release of 15 individuals from Guatemala who had illegally crossed the southern border, including one who had previously been arrested in both Guatemala and Peru. Fallon wrote, "While this is alarming enough, it was then revealed by one of the women that they were apparent victims of sex trafficking and being transported through Franklin County for that purpose." He called the Biden administration's silence on these issues troubling, saying it would only get worse. He urged the administration to end these practices immediately. Fallon joins a growing number of Texas lawmakers calling out Biden's immigration policies. Now, let's pivot to some softer news. It is nearing the end of April, and the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. is gearing up for the next month. It's set to reopen in May. And for the first time, visitors will see a new portrait, that of former President Trump, in the museum's signature exhibition. The museum has been closed 14 months due to the pandemic, but now the National Portrait Gallery will reopen on May 14th. Visitors will see a brand new work, a photograph of the 45th President of the United States. But this image right here is a temporary one. The permanent one, every president has one, is still being planned. The photo was taken in the Oval Office on June 17, 2019. That's the day before Trump officially announced he would seek a second term. Let's take a moment to go through the image. In the background, there are flags reflecting the 5 branches of the armed forces, a portrait of former President Andrew Jackson, and a portrait of founding father Ben Franklin. There's a label next to the portrait. It starts out positively and then spirals into negativity. It reads, "Donald J. Trump was elected President of the United States after tapping into populist American sentiment. Having led a career in business and television, he created an identity that was anti-traditional government and put forth an America First agenda. During his tenure, Trump appointed a record number of federal judges, including 3 Supreme Court justices. He brokered the Abraham Accords, significantly restricted immigration, and reduced government regulations. In February 2020, the unemployment rate was a record low at 3.5%. The description of the text can be found on the museum's website. The gallery director tells the Washingtonian the museum welcomes anyone, be they Trump supporters or others, saying, "We are a nonpartisan institution and understand that there are public opinions on both sides of the fence." Starting May 14th, the gallery will be open to the public with timed entry free passes for all visitors. The temporary portrait will not have an unveiling event. That is reserved for the actual commission, which will include a ceremony for the Trumps and invited guests to witness the unveiling. The portrait will be in the museum's America's Presidents permanent exhibition, which has portraits of all past presidents. It will be a part of the permanent collections. Outside the White House, the America's Presidents exhibition is the only complete collection of U.S. presidents' portraits. Now let's touch on President Biden's first big speech to Congress, slated for tonight, Wednesday evening. That's on the eve of his first 100 days in office. So what's going to be in this speech? Biden is expected to unveil the American Families Plan. It's so-called human infrastructure, such as child care, free city college tuition, paid time off, and so forth. So who's paying for it? Biden has indicated tax hikes on the wealthy. According to White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, other topics include police reform, immigration, gun safety, continuing work on the pandemic, and getting Americans back to work. This year's ceremony is set to look quite different due to the pandemic. The audience is going to be quite small. Only about 200 lawmakers received tickets to attend. The speech is slated for 9 p.m. Eastern and streamed on a number of platforms. Major news networks will carry it, and the White House will stream it on its website as well as other social media platforms. Senator Tim Scott will give the Republican response to the president's speech. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.